Welcome to the Sublime Soiree. I'm Sue, and Linda and I are so excited that you are here with us today. We have the pleasure of welcoming Becky Harling to the show. And Becky is a best-selling author who's written on faith, relationships, and walking with God. Her newest book is Friendwise, and this book talks all about cultivating meaningful relationships and friendships that are Christ-centered. Becky, we are so excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Hey, I'm excited to be with both of you. This is going to be so much fun.
Well, thank you so much, Becky. And for the people tuning in who might not know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey as an author, and also what inspired you to really focus on relationships in much of your work?
Yeah, so I am married to the love of my life, Steve Harling. We have four adult kids, and now we have 14 grandkids, and I'm
Wow.
loving this season of life. It's so ridiculously fun. So that's my family life. But
Okay.
years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and during that season, and I've always been kind of a fairly driven person, just
Mm,
accomplishing the next thing. And during cancer, I couldn't accomplish anything. It was kind of
mm,
like healing on the couch from surgeries. And during that time, the Lord really spoke to me about prioritizing my friendships a little bit more.
mhm,
And I realized, yeah, life is short and I don't want to just be, trying to accomplish the next goal. I want
mhm.
to spend time with friends and enjoying the people that God has placed in my life. So that's a little bit about the backstory of
Okay.
this book in particular.
Okay.
Becky, can you tell us about maybe a friendship or maybe a perspective that had a strong influence in you writing this book?
Yeah. So I had wanted to write books. That was a goal of mine. I really didn't feel confident in that area. And
Mhm.
during the time that I had cancer, God had brought a wonderful mentor in my life who was very well known and had written a lot of books. And so she gave my name to a publishing company.
Oh,
This
wow.
actually never happens, but a publishing, NAF Press actually
Okay.
called me and said, "Hey, we hear you want to write a book." And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, submit a proposal. So I did, and they turned it down.
Okay.
And then they said, but we like the way you write. So come back and give us another proposal. So I did, and they turned that one down. And they said, well, we still like the way you write. We don't feel like you're writing on the right thing. And at that
Mhm.
point, I went back to my mentor and said, what do I do? I feel like quitting. She's like, no, 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 we're not going to quit. And another friend of mine said, I'm going to pay for a night in a hotel for you,
Hmm.
Okay.
and you go, and this hotel happened to be on a beach, which is my
Oh,
favorite place
lovely.
in the world. But she's like, you go sit with God on the beach and ask him what he wants you to write about. So
Hmm.
I did that, and the Lord gave me the topic for that first book. And, that was how I got started. And I realized that that's very different from a lot of authors, but God had placed these two
Yeah.
wise friends in my life who really
Mhm.
encouraged me to keep going when it felt hard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that.
No doubt that you
Mhm.
were called to do this. So that's
Mhm.
wonderful. So, in terms of writing friend wise, you may have actually already answered this for us, Becky, but was there a particular season that inspired you? Was it a particular friendship that inspired you? Or maybe a moment where you just recognized the joy and the power in developing long lasting, attentive relationships? Or maybe it's all three. I'm not sure.
It definitely started during my cancer journey, but as I began really this journey of personal growth
Mhm.
and figuring out and listening and growing in my own personal journey to become more emotionally healthy, I
Mhm.
realized that the Book of Proverbs talks
Mhm.
so much about
Mhm.
spiritually and emotionally healthy friendships.
Yeah.
And I was hearing a lot of women say things like, well, I'm lonely,
Mhm.
and I can't I can't figure out how to make friends or to keep
Mhm.
friends.
Mhm.
And as I was thinking about that question, I'm like, it's all there in Proverbs.
Mhm.
And so I was looking at my own friendships and like what makes one friendship really special. God has really blessed me with great friends. And so I had to kind of step back and say, what makes these friendships so great?
Mhm.
And then reading through the book of Proverbs, I found a lot of the answers were there. And
Wow.
so that's why I wrote the book. And I was like, other women need this because we're designed for friendship. It's a
Yeah.
gift of God to us. And if we don't have close friends, we're
Mhm.
not growing as much spiritually as we could be. And
Mhm.
so we really need to take a look at that and figure out what's missing and how do I grow in that area.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Becky, can you share with us maybe a story from your book or maybe your life of a friendship that really transformed you, or maybe had a significant impact? I know you've mentioned a story about cancer, but what would be another one? I feel like your whole book is full of great stories and
It
examples.
is. It is. Um, I have had so many friends really impact my life, but I think about a friend that I made. We were both raising toddlers at the time, and
Mhm.
they were in our church. My husband was a pastor, and we started getting together for coffee and prayer, and we would kind of let the kids play. My two youngest were toddlers. My older kids were older than hers, but we started praying together and praying scripture together. And we started praying for our kids that they would grow up and marry godly men and women, And then my dear friend, who I felt such a connection with, had to move. And she moved
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
China.
Oh,
And a
wow.
few years after that, I had to move and we moved to California. And at that time, she was in Michigan. But we stayed in touch. And then in 2005, we both moved here to Colorado Springs and
Okay.
reignited that friendship. We had been praying for each other for years, but now we could pray together. And, to this day, now we have 21 grandchildren between the two of us. Our
Wow.
kids are
Mm.
all doing well, and we continue to pray together. And what I love about my friend Judy is, we can text each other early in the morning and say, hey, I'm really struggling today. Can we pray? And we both hit our needs and we pray,
Mm. Mm.
and there's a vulnerability there and an authenticity
Mhm.
that is just beautiful because we have each other's back, and we both encourage the other to keep seeking the Lord first, to
Mhm.
pray scripture,
Mm.
and to continue on this journey of pursuing Jesus.
Mm.
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 That's so beautiful.
Mhm. Mm.
So, one of the things that we really love about the book, Becky, is actually the way that it's designed in this 30-day guide. And there are short chapters, but each one of them is filled with a verse from Proverbs and a brief illustration, a relational truth for the day. And then you also do reflective questions and prayer. And then you pepper the entire book with quotes about being good friends. So, a very intentional structure. Can you tell us
Yes.
why you set it up that way and what your hope was and how it would help women to build lasting, connected relationships?
Sure. So the reason I set it up that way is because the women that I know, the women in my world, are all busy
Uh-huh.
and
Mm.
they don't have time to read really long books.
Mhm.
Publishers will tell you if you write a long book, it's a high probability that people won't read it
Okay.
because
Mm.
they're
Yes.
all
Mhm.
busy. The
Yes.
younger women are all taking their kids to soccer practice, dance lessons, school
Mhm.
events, all that kind of thing. And women in middle age are working, and
Mhm.
and maybe young moms too, and we're all busy. So I wanted something that would be relatively short, an easy read, loaded with stories,
Mhm.
but that each of the 30 very short days or chapters would have one principle that women could focus on. So if they read one chapter a week, they could just focus on that one principle. Or if they were
Mhm.
more ambitious and read one a day, they could focus on that principle for the day. So that's why I set it up like that. I wanted it to be intentional.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
That's such a great way to do it because so
Hmm.
many people don't have that time, but
Right.
I love that. Mm.
Right.
Your book has so many practical principles, including listening and empathizing, respecting boundaries, slowing down, and simply being present. Which of these do you think people tend to struggle with most in our busy world
Mm.
today, and why?
That's a hard question. I am thinking about that question because I would say a lot of those, but I
Mm,
think
Yeah.
probably the number one thing that I have seen, particularly in this present age, is I feel like most people are more concerned about what they're going to say than
mm,
how they're listening. And listening is 80% of communication. And
mhm,
so if we're not being really intentional in listening to our friends, we're not going to keep our friends, you
Right.
know? And if we talk too much, it's not going to go well. It's not
Mhm.
that in friendship you can't share your heart. Certainly, hopefully you can. But I would say that most of us need to prioritize listening in this day and age more than talking. We are living in a world full of opinions. Everybody has
mm.
opinions about everything, from
Yes.
raising kids to how do you fold laundry to certainly the
Yes.
political realm. Everybody has opinions,
Right.
Mhm,
right? But
mhm,
what most people need is a listening ear. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes, as women who are trying to be wise, we may dive in with advice when really what people want is to feel heard. Most people
mhm,
can solve their own problems. And I know for myself, I have authentically blown that, and had to go back to the Lord and say, "Oh, forgive me. I gave advice there," and then go back and apologize. But I think if we could focus our minds on listening more than
Hmm.
talking, we'd
mhm,
get a lot farther in the realm of friendship.
mhm,
That rings so true to me, Becky. Back in January, at the very beginning of January, my mom went home to the Lord after 92
I'm
years here on
sorry.
earth.
mhm,
Thank you. Thank you. She is a tiny woman with a mighty legacy that she has left behind. And
mhm,
a huge piece of that was listening. It was just so fun to go to church with her on Sundays and see all of the people who came up to get their hug from Frida.
mhm,
And it was because all of them had experienced her listening so intently to them, and not just listening, but taking what she
mhm,
heard to prayer and encouraging them in it. But boy, it really started
Mm,
with that focus. And boy,
mhm,
that is a legacy that I am really trying
mhm,
to practice
mhm,
even more now that I've just
mhm,
had that to reflect back on. But
mhm,
one, so for people, there might be people who have a tendency, there may be any one of us at any time who have a tendency to kind of overwork in our friendships, to try a little too hard. So, what would your advice be to those people for how to just slow down and
mhm,
simply show up fully for others?
Yeah, so I think a lot of us are recovering overfunctioners,
Mm,
and so we overfunction maybe in our friendships, in our marriages, in our parenting, in
mhm,
our occupation, in our job. And I believe that God is calling us to let go of control, to
mhm,
realize that He is the blessed controller of all things, and
mhm,
that He has a plan, and that his call in our life is to trust him.
mhm,
And so when we find ourselves over functioning in a friendship, it's usually coming from a root of fear. And
mhm,
so dialing back a little and then saying, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid that I'm going to lose this friend? Am I afraid that I'm going to be lonely? What am I afraid of? How
mhm,
can I bring that to the Lord? And how can I just rest? Now,
mhm,
that doesn't
mhm.
mean that you're not to be intentional, because we are to be intentional with
Right.
friendship, but we're not to overfunction. And so
mhm,
there's a fine balance there.
mhm, mhm,
That's a good thing to keep in mind for sure.
mhm.
Mm.
So, if someone wanted to start small with a habit that they could incorporate every day to become more friend wise, what would you say that might be?
Boy, that is another tough question. You guys are good at asking tough questions. You like to narrow me down to just one thing, and I can think of a plethora of things, but
Right.
I'm
Mm,
going to try to narrow it down. Maybe a beginning step
mm,
is to begin with prayer. I mean, I believe that prayer is foundational in my life,
For
and
sure.
it is the foundation for my relationship with Christ and for my relationships with others. And so I would say it starts with prayer,
Mm.
both praying for friends, and praying about how you yourself want to show up as a friend, and
Mhm.
just begin offering to pray for people and
Mhm.
begin and really take that seriously. Sometimes you can say, "Oh, I'll pray for you," and then, you don't really. But
Right.
instead, be intentional about that. And also in your journey of prayer, saying, "Lord, help me to show up the way you want me to show up in
Yes.
this friendship. Help me to show up with a listening ear, a compassionate heart. Help me to not show up as somebody who's dying to be the expert or, as the one who's all knowledgeable or all
Mhm.
powerful. Help me to show up really with a focus on my friend." So I would say
Yes.
prayer.
Yes, that's great.
mm,
Always going first to the Lord in prayer. That's a
mm,
fantastic piece of advice.
Yeah.
So you talk about how friendships are really God ordained and they make us more and more into the image of Christ as we walk through
mm,
them. And so we were wondering, is there a particular friendship that you've had or friendships that have done just that for you, have made you more and
mm,
more in the image of Christ?
mm,
Yeah, absolutely. I think of several. I have two friends who are older than me.
Uh-huh.
One of them is Linda and one of them is Margaret. And I have learned
mm,
so much by watching their lives,
Mhm.
and how they have orchestrated the really big things in life. And,
Mhm.
Margaret has lost her husband,
Mhm.
and I've been watching,
Mhm.
because someday that could be me. And
Mhm.
Linda has walked through enormous challenges,
mm,
and I have been watching. And so they shape
Mhm.
my life. And then I have friends that are, more my age. I have Judy and Jill and Gail. And um, Jill doesn't live near me, but she and I have spurred each other on towards deeper walks with the Lord along the way. Judy and I, the same. And Gail does live here. And so we get together probably every other week for coffee or lunch when we
Uh-huh.
can. And in those times, it's so precious because we share what the Lord is doing in our lives, and we share prayer requests, and we ask how we can pray for each other. And so all that whole community of women
Yes.
really helped transform my life, helped me move closer to
mm,
Jesus.
Mhm.
mm,
Mhm.
mm.
Absolutely.
In today's world, we see loneliness is so common. It's an epidemic.
Mm.
How do you intentionally see friendships as really helping impact our spiritual, our physical, um, our emotional well-being?
I love this question. I did a lot of research on
Mm,
this, and it's amazing. If you have, let's start with the physical realm. You know, if you have good friends, you are going to have lower blood pressure
Mm.
than your counterparts. If you have good friends and you happen to walk through the cancer journey, you have a better chance of surviving cancer with close friends around you. The Mayo Clinic came out with that. If you
Wow.
have good
mhm,
friends, your life expectancy is longer.
mm,
We had a lot of people die during COVID, not only from COVID,
Mhm.
but because they were so isolated,
Right.
because that's not God's ideal for
mhm,
us. We had
Right.
to during that season,
Mhm.
but that's not to go on long term.
Right.
And then emotionally, if you have good friends, you're less likely to deal with severe depression or anxiety
mm,
because you have a sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Loneliness, you're not going to deal with that as much because I have a community around me. So
Yes.
you might wake up on some days and feel depressed, but you know where to go
Mhm.
because you have friends around you. And then spiritually, the Bible teaches us that you grow best spiritually in community. You were never meant to grow your spiritual walk on your
Right.
own. And so if you're part of a church community, part of a small group community, part of a community of close friends who are walking with Jesus, you have a better chance of ending well your spiritual journey than if you isolate. Isolation really was Satan's idea, I believe. And it's very detrimental to our physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
Absolutely.
I thought that was such a good reminder in your book about not being exclusive or alone, but in community. It was just, I
Yeah.
think sometimes in our world, it's so me focused. What do I need to do instead of how do we encourage and grow together? I thought that was good.
Thank you.
So, Becky, we know that there are seasons for friendships. Some friendships are very long lasting. There are other friendships that might be brief, but they're deeply meaningful. So, how can we ask you to encourage women to navigate the fact that there are different seasons of friendships without becoming disappointed or discouraged by those seasons?
There are different seasons for friendship. And I will say, sometimes friends do disappoint us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes friendships end, and sometimes they may not end well. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if we look at our life as a whole life and
Mm-hmm.
realize there are different seasons and that God allows all these different seasons. He's over all of them. Then, when there is disappointment or we lose a friendship or one grows in distant, we can always go back to the Lord and say, Lord, what do you want me to see in this? How do you
Mm-hmm.
want me to navigate this? And then sometimes I've heard this illustration. I think it's such a good one that, friendship can be like a bus. So there's different people in the bus, and sometimes people move closer to the front of the bus to be near you, and other good friends might move closer to the back of the bus where they're a little farther away from you. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody on the bus is important,
Mm-hmm.
because they all add to your life in some
Right.
way, shape, or form. And so viewing it in that way at least helps me navigate the different seasons of friendship.
Yes, that's great.
Becky, I know that our listeners are going to want to connect with you and learn more about your books and follow your work. What is the best way to do that?
Oh, I love that question. So join me at beckyharling.com for
Okay.
sure. I send out a Monday morning devotional. It lands in your inbox. You have to subscribe, right? So if you
Uh-huh.
sign up for the free gift that's up there right now, I think there's 2 free gifts up there or 3. I don't know. But one of them is about the busy woman's gathering guide, how you can gather for friends, even if you are busy, whether you gather with one or many. So if you sign up for that, then my devotional blog ends up in your inbox on Monday morning. It comes
Okay.
once a week, and it's a short devotional designed to give you renewed faith for the week ahead.
Okay.
And on my website, there are other updates as well, like my husband and I are leading a trip to Greece in September.
Oh,
We're going to
nice.
do the
Yes.
footsteps of Paul. And so people can join us on that trip. And then there's always updates about any new book I'm writing. So those are some of the things that are on my website. So really, that's the best way to join me. And I am on social media. So, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn are the primary ones.
Great. And it's under Becky Harling,
Yes.
the social
So
media.
Instagram is, what is it under? Instagram, I think, is just under at Becky Harling,
Uh-huh. Okay.
I think. I don't know.
Okay.
You'll see my picture there, so you know it's me.
Yes.
Great.
And Facebook, I have a personal page, which is Becky Harling, and then I have my author speaker page. You can find those there. And
Okay.
LinkedIn is LinkedIn, so you can
Yeah.
find me there.
Great.
Great. And we'll link those below too in the
Yeah,
video.
for sure.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. And they can buy the book wherever Christian books are sold.
Great. Okay.
Excellent. Well, friends, we really hope that you have enjoyed our conversation with Becky and that you've both been encouraged and inspired to grow in your own friendships and to cultivate deeper friendships. And Becky, we're really so happy that you were able to share your stories and your insights with us. And really, what you've done for us today has helped us all become more friend wise. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And friends, we also pray that God will use this little book to help your relationships grow and that you would have the joy of a deeply connected life. Friends, we do pray that your week is truly sublime and that you live each day free above the fray. Thank you again, Becky, for being with us today. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, friends, for being with us.